For decades, countries that wanted to trade oil had to play by one set of rules, rules written and enforced by the West, especially the United States. Break the rules and you got punished. Your economy could be cut off, your people left struggling. But this train was different. It didn't follow the old map. It didn't pass through US-controlled waters or rely on dollar payments. It showed the world that Iran and China were doing something bold, rewriting the rules right under everyone's nose. No explosions, no speeches, just quiet defiance on a railroad in the middle of nowhere. And that, more than anything else, is what makes this moment a game changer. To understand why this train matters so much, you have to go back to how oil trade used to work. For decades, oil didn't just flow wherever it wanted. It moved through narrow, heavily watched routes, like the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East or the Suez Canal near Egypt. These are known as choke points, small areas that control big movements. And guess who watched over them? The United States. With its powerful navy, the U.S. had eyes on almost every major sea route. If a country tried to ship oil without permission, it could be stopped, searched, or even blocked entirely. But there was more to the system than just military control. Behind the scenes was something even more powerful, the petrodollar. That means almost all global oil sales had to be done in U.S. dollars. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. This gave the U.S. huge financial leverage. It kept demand for the dollar high and let America influence who could buy and sell energy. Countries that obeyed the system had access to the global economy. But if you challenged it, like Iran or Venezuela, you got hit with sanctions. These were economic punishments meant to choke off your money, oil sales, and power. It was a simple system. Control the sea, control the currency, control the world. But as we'll see next, that control is slipping. This train wasn't just carrying oil, it was carrying a message. To many in the West, it looks like just another trade route, but to anyone watching closely, it's something much bigger. It's a fault line, a crack in the old system. Here's why it's so alarming to the U.S. and its allies. Iran and China just bypassed the entire Western-controlled oil trade system. No U.S. dollars were involved. No warships could stop it. No international sanctions could track it or freeze it. It didn't sail through a monitored sea. It rolled across land through Central Asia, where no one was watching. It's like someone built a secret back door into a house you thought was secure. And now, they're walking in and out as they please. This isn't just a clever shortcut. It's a direct challenge to the rules the West spent decades enforcing. A train carrying oil from a sanctioned country, arriving openly in China without asking permission from the global powers? That's not just trade, that's a statement. It says, you can't stop us anymore. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. For those who've relied on control, leverage, and the petrodollar to shape global power. This train didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the result of a quiet but powerful deal, one that most people missed when it was signed. In 2021, China and Iran agreed on something huge. A 25-year partnership worth $400 billion. That's right, $400 billion over a quarter of a century. But this wasn't just about money. It was about strategy. Here's the deal. Iran would give China a steady supply of oil, at a discount. In return, China would invest in Iran's infrastructure, building railways, ports, roads, and communication networks. Not flashy headlines, just quiet groundwork. This was more than a business deal. It was a lifeline. Iran had been cut off from much of the global economy because of Western sanctions. Banks wouldn't work with it, companies avoided it, but China offered something the West didn't, a way back in. And for China, this was brilliant. While others were busy fighting over headlines, China was locking in cheap energy for decades to come and expanding its Belt and Road Initiative at the same time. The BRI is China's global trade network, a modern version of the ancient Silk Road. And Iran, sitting between East and West, is the perfect bridge. So while the world looked away, China made its move. No speeches, no drama, just a masterstroke of planning, one oil barrel and one railway at a time. At first, China and Iran didn't want the world to notice what they were doing, so they kept it quiet. Oil was disguised, labeled as coming from other countries. Ships changed flags, cargo papers were rewritten, the oil moved in circles through middlemen to hide its true origin. But over time, they didn't need to hide anymore. Why? Because they had found a route the West couldn't see, couldn't touch, and couldn't control the land. Instead of sailing through dangerous waters, Iranian oil started moving by rail across the vast open landscapes of Central Asia. It passed through countries like Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, then into Xinjiang, China's far western region. This route is a blind spot in Western surveillance. There are no U.S. warships in these deserts, no drones, no naval blockades, just miles and miles of tracks stretching across dry plains and mountains. And here's the clever part. The terrain itself became a shield. Where satellites can track ships at sea, they struggle to monitor railcars hidden under desert dust or inside long tunnels. And while oceans can be patrolled, land routes through friendly nations, that's a whole different game. In short, Iran and China created a land-based oil highway, one the West didn't see coming, and still can't figure out how to stop. For nearly 50 years, the US dollar wasn't just currency, it was oil's passport. If you wanted to buy or sell oil on the global market, you had to use dollars. This system, known as the Petrodollar, gave the US enormous power. Countries needed dollars to trade oil, which meant they also needed US banks, U.S. approval, and U.S. influence. But now, that system is cracking. Iran and China are trading oil without the dollar. Payments are made in Chinese yuan, gold, or even through barter. Oil in exchange for construction projects or technology. That's like building an entire economy that ignores the U.S. financial system. And Iran isn't alone. Russia is also pushing oil sales in rubles, or yuan. Even Saudi Arabia, once the biggest petrodollar ally, is now discussing oil deals with China in non-dollar currencies. Every time oil changes hands without dollars, it weakens the dollar's grip on the world. Think of it like a giant dam holding back a flood. The petrodollar was that dam. But now, cracks are forming. The water is seeping through, slow at first, but unstoppable. And if that dam ever breaks completely, it could reshape not just the oil market, but the entire global financial system. For years, U.S. sanctions were the world's most feared financial weapon. If you got on America's bad side, your economy could be cut off overnight. Banks would freeze your accounts. Companies would stop doing business with you. Oil sales would dry up. It worked on Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, and even scared U.S. allies. But today, that weapon isn't so sharp anymore. Take Iran. Despite some of the toughest sanctions in history, its oil exports have surged to over 1.5 million barrels per day. Most of it going straight to Asia. How? Because countries like China don't care about U.S. pressure anymore. They've built systems that go around sanctions. Railways instead of sea routes. Barter instead of banks. yuan instead of dollars. And it's not just about Iran. Sanctioned countries are watching and learning. They see Iran selling oil, making deals, and surviving just fine without the West. This shakes the global market. Investors once believed sanctions could control bad actors and keep markets stable. But now, they're watching sanctioned nations thrive and wondering if the old rules still matter, and that's a huge deal. This Iran-China oil train? It's not just a one-time trick, it's a model, and more countries are starting to copy it. Enter BRICS, a powerful group of 5 major economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, they represent over 40% of the world's population and a growing chunk of the global economy. And they're tired of playing by Western rules. So what are they doing? They're building a new system, one that can't be shut down by U.S. sanctions or controlled by Western banks. They've created their own development bank, their own currency swap agreements, and now they're exploring ways to trade oil and goods without using the U.S. dollar at all. Iran's railway oil deal is just the beginning. BRICS countries are watching and thinking, why not us? Why rely on sea routes that the U.S. Navy can block? Why depend on payment systems that Washington can freeze? This isn't just a rebellion, it's a blueprint, a quiet, calculated plan to build a parallel world order. One where trade continues even if the West disapproves, one where decisions aren't made in Washington or Brussels, but in Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, and beyond. And with each train that rolls across Central Asia, this new world gets a little more real. Once one domino falls, the others don't stand for long. Right now it's Iran and China, but others are already stepping into line. Saudi Arabia, the world's oil king and longtime U.S. ally, is rethinking its loyalty. When China offers infrastructure, tech, and political protection, without lecturing on human rights or democracy, that's a tempting offer. Then there's Venezuela, rich in oil but battered by sanctions. They see a way out, join this new network, trade oil without the dollar, and rebuild their economy with China-backed projects. Even some European countries are quietly eyeing the shift. They're energy-hungry and tired of the volatility that comes with US-led policies. If they can get cheaper oil and guaranteed delivery, even if it comes by train through Central Asia, they might start thinking less about politics and more about price. And that's the real power of this oil train. It's not just moving barrels, it's moving minds. It's recruiting countries, one by one, not with weapons or threats, but with pragmatism. Do you want affordable energy and modern infrastructure, or more lectures and restrictions? The more countries that say yes to this new system, the harder it will be for the old one to survive. For decades, the West, especially the United States, controlled the global oil trade by controlling the seas. Think of it like this. Oil is often shipped on big tankers through a few narrow strategic waterways, like the Strait of Hormuz near Iran or the Suez Canal in Egypt. These choke points are like the gates on a water slide. If you close the gate, no oil gets through. The U.S. Navy acted as a giant security guard, patrolling these routes. If a country tried to sneak oil past sanctions or break the rules, the Navy could stop their ships, board them, and seize their cargo. This naval power was a huge advantage. It gave the West control over who could sell oil and under what conditions. But now a new challenge has emerged. Oil is moving on trains that cross thousands of miles over land through Central Asia. Instead of the narrow waterways, these railways run across vast deserts, mountains, and borders that are much harder to monitor or control. Imagine trying to stop a freight train rolling through hundreds of miles of desert with no Navy ships around. You can't just wave a gunboat at it. So, what options does the West have? Sabotage? Destroying the railway or trains might stop the flow, but it's risky. It could be seen as an act of war. Imagine a major power blowing up a train in another country's territory. It could trigger serious conflict. Sanctions? They're already losing their effectiveness. Countries like China have built systems to work around the US-controlled global financial networks. Iran pays in Chinese yuan or uses barter deals, trading oil for infrastructure or technology instead of cash. That means even if the West tries to cut off payments, oil keeps moving. With sanctions and naval power no longer enough, the West is stuck. They can make threats, issue warnings, or impose more sanctions. But these tools feel like old hammers trying to fix a new kind of lock. In short, the West is frustrated and scrambling. It's like having a toolbox full of tools, but none fit the new problem. The old methods that worked for decades no longer control the flow of oil, and new strategies haven't been found yet. This dilemma shows how much power is shifting away from the West. The railways carrying Iranian oil through Central Asia aren't just trains. They're symbols of a new world order where old rules don't apply, and the West's control is fading. What we're seeing with this oil train is much bigger than just a new way to move fuel. It's about who gets to write the rules of the world's economy and politics. For more than 70 years, the United States has been the top dog on the global stage. It controlled the biggest banks, the most important trade routes, and had the power to punish countries that didn't follow its rules. This is why the US dollar became the world's main currency for trade, especially for oil, creating the Petrodollar system. Countries had to use dollars if they wanted to buy and sell oil. This gave the US huge influence over global finance and politics. But now, that system is cracking. To understand this shift, think about the Silk Road, the ancient network of trade routes that connected Asia and Europe thousands of years ago. Traders moved silk, spices, and ideas along these long land routes. The Silk Road shaped civilizations by connecting distant parts of the world. Today, that ancient idea is being revived, but with a modern twist. China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is building a massive network of railways, ports, pipelines, and even digital infrastructure, stretching from Asia through Central Asia, Africa, and Europe. It's like rebuilding the Silk Road, but this time, it's armored with technology and backed by billions of dollars in investment. This network creates a new trade system that doesn't depend on Western-controlled oceans or financial markets. Countries like China, Iran, and many others can now trade with less interference from the US and its allies. This shift means the world is moving from a unipolar system, where one country, the US, had most of the power, to a multipolar system, where multiple countries have significant influence. For everyday people, this change will affect things like gas prices. Who controls oil trade affects how much we pay at the pump. Trade deals, new partnerships will change what products are available and where. Global conflicts, alliances are shifting, and new tensions could arise based on these new trade routes. So this is more than just politics. It's about the future you will live in. Understanding this new world order helps explain why news about oil, trade, and global alliances matters to everyone, not just politicians. The quiet movement of a train carrying Iranian oil through deserts is a symbol of this massive transformation, a slow but steady shift in who holds power in the 21st century. The next decade won't be decided on battlefields with tanks and guns. Instead, it will be shaped by trade deals, railways, and new alliances, like the one between Iran and China, quietly rewriting the rules of global power. If you want to understand what's coming, whether it's why gas prices might jump, which countries will rise or fall, or how your everyday life connects to these global shifts, you need to stay informed. This isn't just history happening in the past. It's a playbook for the future. So, if you want to keep up with the forces reshaping our world, make sure to hit subscribe. That way, you'll get the latest updates on these powerful changes before they hit the headlines. Because the story of this oil train is just the beginning. The real game changer is still unfolding, and it's going to affect all of us.